acrophobia is a common phobia across the world that many people suffer from that makes one fearful of heights. I'm actually kind of afraid of heights. Nosophobia is a little less common, but scientists describe it as a fear of catching a disease, maybe even not knowing if one does in fact have a disease in his body, God forbid, that he doesn't know about. There are many different phobias in the world. There's even a phobia called phobophobia that is a fear of having a phobia. Kind of silly, but it's a real thing. And it seems that the question is fair to ask that when one does have a phobia, what are they supposed to do? They have a life to live, things to do, goals to accomplish, dreams to chase down. But one isn't granted the opportunity to select his brain from the store before he's born. You are given your mental faculties, your mental abilities, your intelligence, and you get what you get and you don't get upset. So it can be hard when one feels that he's tied down based on a certain phobia, a certain nitiya, a certain disposition. And the ante is upped. When the Rambam tells us in his Yad HaChazaka and Hilchos Deos that people do have different mental makeups and are drawn towards certain midos differently. Some people are more predisposed to getting angry, while others more inclined to fall into kas, anger. Everyone is different. Their brains wire differently, it would seem. But the Rambam says very clearly that we all have free will, no matter where we are on these midos spectrums, to progress and to even overcome. In fact, in the world of midos and overcoming our predispositions and how our brains are wired is what the Vilna Gaon says is the point of life. In his commentary on Mishlei, the Gaon tells us that if we're not trying to break evil midos, well then lama lo chaim, why do you wake up in the morning? What's the point of life? Because that's everything. Trying to progress on the spectrum towards good midos every single day. Rav Chaim Vital tells us that developing our midos is the citizenship, the card, the diploma that gets us into the game, the college of Torah. Midos is just first. That's why it's not a mitzvah anywhere to perfect your midos. Because of course you need to have good midos and overcome the struggles of the pre-wired brain and the dispositions towards anger and lust. That's what you're supposed to do as you progress towards Torah and mitzvos and true freedom. So the ante has truly been raised, been upped. Because we now have to overcome predispositions in our brain for the sake of midos that get us closer to Torah. And if that wasn't enough, our mental makeup, phobias, worries, fears, struggles in our emotional states, our outlook on life, how our brains are wired, they also seem quite frequently to get in the way of our mitzvah adherence. We're told to learn Torah, v'higisa bo yom v'layla. But if we struggle to sit still, we don't have such a long focus capacity, it can be hard. in the realm of V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, loving Hashem. It's a commandment to love. But just like someone who doesn't understand what they're learning, that it can feel like a monotonous and boring practice, so too, v'ahavta, to love Hashem, when you don't feel the love, when your brain isn't predisposed to it. In fact, in these cases, may even be wired to not enjoy or engage in the Talmud, Torah, and v'ahavta mitzvos. Makes things really hard. So we must find a way to rewire our brains, to spark and ignite our hearts in the avodas Hashem that is commanded. And it's tricky because the brain, the heart, the soul, where we're really trying to change things, it isn't touchable. You could try to open your head and mess around with the brain, but it just looks like some silly putty. The brain looks like noodles and Play-Doh. It looks like an organ, but you're not going to change your thoughts and your emotions that way. So we need some sort of mechanism that will act like a bionic arm reaching into our heads, rewiring our heads and hearts, changing us emotionally and mentally. So today, I hope to present to you the solution. The solution is not new. In fact, it's as old as time. But it's a timely insight because it comes from the Sefer HaChinuch, which is a sefer written by a Rishon that systematically goes through all of the 613 mitzvos, parsha by parsha. And this week, one of the parshios, one of the mitzvos in Parshas Bo, the Sefer HaChinuch takes the liberty to explain it and then build upon it. And it gives us the clear answer to this question. And for the sake of brevity, of giving over the answer in an easy-to-remember, concise way, I'm going to say the line that is the solution, and then we'll explain, according to the Sefer HaChinuch, what it means. So, the panacea to all of these issues, aforementioned issues and challenges of rewiring our brain, of changing where we are on the mental and emotional spectrum, overcoming the mental challenges. The answer is to not break a bone from the Pesach sacrifice. That is mitzvah 16. It is a mitzvah given in this week's parsha. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, this is the answer. That's it. If you don't break bones in your Pesach sacrifice, you're going to win the gold medal. Why, says the Sefer HaChinuch? Well, he answers because he has his own question. The Sefer HaChinuch, in addressing this mitzvah of not breaking the bone of the Korban Pesach when you eat it, is he can't understand why Hashem gave so many mitzvos regarding the Korban Pesach. We are commanded to eat it at a certain time. There's a mitzvah to eat it a certain way. There's mitzvos about the bones. There's mitzvos about its disposal. Why is it that so many mitzvos, so many zichronos were given to us? V'lama yitzava osanu Hashem yisparach lasos kol eila lizikaron osomanes. We're trying to recall the Exodus. And we're trying to slaughter the God of the Egyptians, make a statement that we're free, that we serve not animals, not any other God other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the one creator and master of the universe. So the Sefer HaChinuch is bothered. With one mitzvah, with one remembrance, we'll remember that Hashem told us to do it. Daddy said so. And that'd be enough. That it won't be forgotten from our minds or our children's minds. It's a fair question. To address this question, the Sefer HaChinuch begins very strongly, that you should know. Ki lo mechachma tispasenu al zeh. You have not asked this question because of wisdom or with wisdom. Umachsheves hanar yish'acha l'daber kein. And you are thinking very naively, very youthfully in the words that you speak. It doesn't make any sense what you are asking, that there should only be one mitzvah. Because va'atobini in bina shoma azois v'hate oznecha ushma alamadecha lahoyil ba'Torah mitzvahs. Incline your ear and listen, my son. Listen, my child, and let the Torah and its mitzvos educate you. And know, ki ha'adam nif'al kefi pe'ulasav. For a man is nachschlept, is acted upon according to his actions. V'liboy, and his heart. V'chol machshavaisav, and all of his thoughts. Tamid acher maisav. They follow after his actions. Shehu oisek bohem, in what he is acting as, what is he involved in, imtov v'imra, whether the actions are good or the actions are poor, are evil. The heart and the mind, they follow the actions. It says a Sefer HaChinuch. And in this mitzvah, the depth behind it, to not break a bone, it's a hint. It's an action that the Torah wants us to act in a monarchic, regal manner. Because the Sefer HaChinuch says that it is pauperish. It is the lower ends of society that suck out all of the bone marrow, trying to get every last drop and conserve every piece of nutrition that they can get their hands on. But the wealthy, but the upper class, the kings, it isn't the way to break bones. So in order to impress this king-like mindset on the Jewish people, because the salvation and redemption is in full swing, and we are transforming ourselves from a nation of slaves to a nation that is a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, well, then we must begin by acting that way. So don't break the bones. And that's one of the very many mitzvos given to impress these thoughtful actions upon our thoughts and our hearts. Ha'adam nif'al kefi pe'ulasav. A brand new reality. Words that really make no sense, although we may have heard them before, but the more you think about it, the more it doesn't add up. But the truth is that a person's mind and heart, who he is, what he identifies as, his eye, it goes after very dry actions. By acting like a king, you change yourself into a king to begin to penetrate the mind. Scientists actually have gotten very excited. I love when they discover a reality that one man with his Gemara 1,000 years ago already spread through the entire Jewish nation. But the scientists have recently discovered the idea of neuroplasticity, which is basically the newfound understanding that the brain is not a non-renewable organ, but you can, through different actions, connect and create new brain waves, brain channels, and patterns to create a new, rewired, reinvigorated, refreshed brain. You can change your brain through actions to rid yourself of certain dysregulated mental brainwaves, fix phobias. And a lot of the modern day contemporary psychology is built upon this idea of neuroplasticity and neurofeedback. That because we cannot touch the brain, it doesn't mean that we cannot affect the brain. It's very exciting that the scientists discovered mitzvah test Zion. That, don't break a bone of the Korban Pesach. Because ha'adam nifal kafi pu'ulosav, that when you act a certain way, you can literally rewire your brain. And it's a fascinating piece, and he weaves this piece through many of the different mitzvahs surrounding the Korban Pesach. The idea of acting like a king and how we dispose of the Korban Pesach and the time that we eat it, how we prepare it, who we do it with, all of it to impress certain actions and try to nachschlep the brain and the heart after the mitzvos and towards Hashem. And if this was the idea just for Korban Pesach and for this mitzvah alone, dayenu, it would have been enough from the Sefer HaChinuch. But he says, closing in this piece, seems very unassuming, but I believe it's very telling and enlightening. He says that, citing a Gemara in Menachos, that you may have heard many times before. It's an often quoted Gemara before or after somebody finishes learning when they want somebody to say Kaddish. They'll cite this teaching. It's a Gemara in Makos. I apologize. It's Makos 23b. That Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lazakos Es Yisrael Lefikach Hirbo Lahem Torah u'mitzvos. That Hashem wanted to give merits to Israel. So therefore he increased Torah and mitzvahs for them. More mitzvahs, 613 of them, because he wanted us to get more reward, more merits. That's how we normally understand it, to be mezaka us. But the Sefer HaChinuch adds a line here. He says, why did Chazal, what did they mean in this line? Defining why Hashem gave us so many mitzvahs. It's kedei lahatpis bohen kol machshavaseinu v'liyos bohen kol askeinu lahitiv lanu b'yacharaseinu, that our entire daily schedule, every corner, nook and cranny of our lives should be fully lit up with mitzvos that will impress upon us all of the different realities that we must internalize that will benefit us in the long run. Every action, every mitzvah is some neuroplasticity, some rewiring of the brain to love and to fear Hashem. It's renewing your relationship with Hashem. It's sticking a bionic arm through your ear into the brain and tickling it to act a different way. You can just think about some of the most common Orach Chaim mitzvos in a very practical way, how they and their philosophies are present in the way that they rewire our brains. Think about what making a bracha is before you enjoy anything of the world, and the recognition that it impresses upon your mind to think about Hashem and to recognize Hashem's existence. Think about the fifth commandment and how it is supposed to show us that people that are older, have more experience, we must honor them. And it should lead us to honor people, things, entities that are larger and greater than we are. Think about the sukkah and the matzah, all of these different mitzvos that carry with them not just truths that we are to recognize, but actions that we are to perform, to have their messages impress deeply in the hearts and the minds of their people that execute them. Every mitzvah, not just not breaking bones of the Korban Pesach, but every one of the 613 is there to rewire our brains to love and to fear Hashem and to connect with the Almighty. I then remembered that really the Sefer Mesilas Yesharim of Ramchal discussed this point at length. When the second step, after one has started to learn Torah, which has then led him to the next level in his climb to total prophecy and basking in the vibrant sun, the bright light of the Shekhinah at the very top, Ruach HaKodesh. But right after Torah, it leads a person towards thinking about life, zehirus, taking things to heart and looking at your life and comparing notes with what you're doing and what the Torah says, using your brain, coming into your wits. But the next step is alacrity, zerizos. But it seems to be kind of out of place. While running to things is important and being on time and moving briskly and swiftly towards the commandment seems to be very important. But that is the very thing, the second step or third step, if you will, in our climb to greatness, that it is that paramount, that constitutional, being alacritous. But the Mesilas Yesharim tells us the same idea that Adam nifal kepfi pu'ulosav and the chitzonius is ma'oreres es hapnimios, that our outsides, they inspire and they affect change in our insides that cannot be touched and can't so readily and easily be changed. So running towards mitzvos, engaging in them with a pretend even at times source of excitement, yeah, that's the way. That's how you change your insides to elevate yourself towards the next step of nikios. You work with what you have to work with, the dry actions and the moving of your feet. And that somehow gets involved in neuroelasticity, or whatever that word is. It rewires your brain to love, fear, and serve Hashem. Shlomo Gansfried makes use of this yesod in teaching one how to have a proper morning routine, where in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch tells us how to get up in the morning and rewire your head and your disposition, moving yourself up on the spectrum of how easy or how tedious and cumbersome it is to wake up in the morning. He says, just get up in the morning 3 times, do it, even though it's excruciatingly painful, and that will change how you feel about the action and make it easy. The chiddush is there. Just how quickly the change and the rewiring of our brains really happens in less than a week. The dysregulations and the poor connections in our brain that create laziness and the natios towards ra and kas and taiva can begin to be flipped. It's almost a form of exposure treatment, of the way that we began this talk, which is of all the different phobias. And this seems to be a way that one, if he could use it to treat his phobia or his kind of uninspired mitzvah adherence, but by acting in a certain way, he can change how he thinks about them. Well, then maybe you could also, and it does, science has proven this, by exposing oneself and acting a certain way, he can overcome a phobia. I've heard of people that were afraid of heights, the acrophobian, that he was healed when, although it was excruciatingly painful, his therapist strapped him into the roller coaster, kicking and screaming, and sent him on the roller coaster 10 times every single day for a month, until eventually it became a really uneventful ride. Because when one acts a certain way, even for any reason, even if he's forcing himself to, it ends up really changing his insides. The Sefer HaChinuch even says that this is hinted at in a major exposing of a secret of the Torah. When the sages told us that anyone who has tefillin on his head and a mezuzah on his doorpost, tzitzis on his corners of his garment, he's promised that he will not sin. Because these actions, these dry, very plain actions, they're constantly impressing upon his heart new realities that literally change how he thinks and what his heart wants to do. With this Adam Nifal Kafi Pe'ulo Sav, the not breaking of Korban Pesach bones, this idea from the Sefer HaChinuch, it answers how we can move ourselves up a rung in our midos struggles, in our sometimes emotional and social health struggles, and definitely in our mitzvah and Torah desires, our ratzon. For in mitos, if you want to be more alacritous, you just run to shul. You force yourself to be on time. You pretend that the Shemona Esrei means something to you, and you force yourself to go through the motions. And these actions, following the way that Chazal told us to daven, word by word, saying Psukei de Zimra like you're counting dollar bills, it makes a change on the heart. The next way to solve the next midah problem of being too self-centered, egotistical, the actions that one can perform to overcome this is actually given to us in the Ramban's Igeres HaRamban, a letter that he wrote, and proper actions and how to have success in one's Torah life. He says if you would like to be an unav, well then head down and heart up. Don't look up and yell at people, act bashfully. But all of the ways to change the mental attitude of how you feel about yourself and how self-centered you are, the Eitzah from the Ramban is to act a certain way. The way that you move your head, where you point your eyes, and how you try to turn your heart certain directions towards God, that changes your midos. And towards our emotional health and the social health, if one feels a bit depressed, melancholic, and sad, you force those cheeks to smile. You flash your teeth towards your friends, no matter how impervious your face may be to the very infrequent smile. If you force yourself to smile, over time it will impress upon your heart simcha, if you are afraid to give drushos in public, to speak up in class, to take the bima, to daven from the amud, to lead the congregation, well, then you guessed it. You do exactly that. You force yourself to give the drasha, to act as the shliach tzibor, to learn from the Torah. Because ha'adam nifal kefi pu'ulosav, one's actions act very powerfully on a person's mind and heart. And in definitely the realms of Torah, we don't even have to make up the ways. We don't need any neuroplasticity. You just do the mitzvos with your head screwed on straight. You are present when you do the mitzvos and internalize what's going on, what they mean, and why you're doing them. And that is the secret drug, the solution to how one will be pulled towards doing more mitzvahs, more Torah, just like a magnet is pulling you towards it. When you treat Hashem like a father, you envision Hashem as something very real, his mitzvos touchable. You begin to develop a love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu like a father. Because when you act that way, it takes real effect in the heart. And the funny thing about all this is that it's advice that's as old as time. But often the advice that is as old as time and hasn't been rethought and been somewhat of a baich svara are the ones that actually work. So, whatever it is that you fear, in a very healthy and proper way, you force yourself to do it. If it's love of Hashem and fear of Hashem that you would like to impress upon yourself, well, then you just force yourself. Go through the motions as prescribed as the medication for love of Hashem and fear of Hashem in the Torah. You do the mitzvos. You daven with fear. You learn like it matters. In Talmud Torah, you pretend to care. You pretend like if I don't understand one of these little parts of the Gemara, then like a great Torah sage, it matters. What is this? How does it make sense? Even though you're pretending? But it feels like that old adage of you fake it until you make it really does work out well here. Because Adam nifal kefi pu'ulosav, and when you don't break Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb bones, it helps to impress upon the heart and the mind the idea of that we are a nation of priests, a nation of kings. It can be awkward at the beginning to engage in heartless, mindless, ma'asim actions. It can even be excruciating to expose oneself to the actual things that he fears. But the hope and the appeal for action is that very quickly, remarkably rapidly, the brain is rewired, restored, and refreshed, ready for action. So even though we didn't get to choose our brains, our dispositions may have been hardwired, but we can open up the motherboard and rewire the brain, grow in our emotional and social health, have a more energetic and positive outlook on life. We can perfect the midos that are prohibited. We can protect ourselves from anger and lustful emotions. We can hotwire our brains to love learning Torah and to love Hashem and fear him by acting as such, by going through the motions, by doing the mitzvos, because ha'adam nifal kefi pe'ulosav, actions take great action upon one's heart and one's mind.
Kedoshim